was a kid, the two things I loved most in life were Godzilla and NES games. So naturally, when Godzilla, Monster of Monsters, came out, it was like a dream come true. Well, almost. To sum it up, most of the game revolved around getting through very repetitive outer space levels, while smashing up tanks and jets and then fighting against Godzilla's monster enemies. Overall, it was pretty mediocre, but back then I didn't care. When I got the game as a present for my 10th birthday, I played it night and day as much as I could. Unfortunately, I traded the game for Amagon a year later, much to my regret when I found out what the game was like. Recently, I had bought a new NES system, and through a lot of hunting and asking around, my friend Billy finally managed to find a copy of Godzilla, Monster of Monsters. I was pumped to play my favorite childhood game. It never even occurred to me to ask where Billy found it. He also gave me some other games like Legend of Zelda, Bomberman, and some stupid thing called Action 52, but Godzilla had to come first. So I started the game, and the nostalgia came flooding back like a tidal wave. Godzilla's 8-bit theme song flooded proudly through the speakers, and I was soon grinning like an idiot. And some people laugh at me for playing such outdated games, but I never had as much enjoyment from any games other than those on the NES. Those 8-bit games take me back to when things were simpler, more safe. But after what happened with this game, I don't have those feelings anymore. I had forgotten how quick the fun of smashing things as Godzilla wore off in the scrolling levels. The game bombards you with bullets and things crashing into you from every direction, and you're too big to avoid most of them. And although my excitement had worn down some, it wasn't long at all before I got my first boss battle. My opponent was Gazzara, an obscure squid kaiju who had never been in a Godzilla movie. The most annoying thing about fighting Gazzara is that he always backs you into a corner and starts smacking you with his tentacles, and you're unable to move until he gets off you. Now, this move doesn't do any damage, but it can stall you until the timer runs out, and you have to start the fight over again. And he regains some health. It's as annoying as it sounds, and of course, he did it when I fought him, only for some reason it caused the game to glitch up, because once he started smacking me, he never stopped. The timer's supposed to end the fight in about 40 seconds, but this lasted for nearly 5 minutes. After a while, the graphics started to mess up with little red blocks all over the place. Which is weird, but I just took the game out, blew on it, and started it again. I wasn't about to let a little glitch stand in my way, so I started again, and this time defeated Gazzara and the level's other boss monster, Mogra, without any problems. So, then it was on to the next planet. Mars. Well, I browsed around the board and found something unexpected. Where Varen's piece should have been, there was instead a piece representing Titanosaurus. There are only 10 kaiju in the game, and the Titanosaurus was not one of them, so I thought perhaps Titanosaurus was originally intended to be in the game, but was swapped out with Varen for some reason. So I began to feel very excited. Not only was I playing my favorite game, but I was playing a prototype of some sort with a new monster, and needless to say, I ran through the levels as fast as I could to see Titanosaurus in action. Fought Gazzara again, beat him before he could do his tentacle smack, but this time, the glitch started happening when he died. Gazzara's sprite didn't sink to the bottom, but instead seemed to be devoured by the glitch, and his eye started randomly spawning all over the screen. I know now that these glitches with Gazzara were my first warning signs that something was very wrong with this game, but foolishly, I ignored it and proceeded on to fight Mogra, who this time had a glitch of his own. Mogra was twice the size he should have been, which startled me. He was also considerably harder to beat than usual, which is to say, not at all. But soon I had defeated him also, and when he died, yet another glitch happened. This happened extremely fast, so I was lucky to get a screen cap of it at all. But what happened was that the giant Mogra sprite started to shatter and melt. And also, if you look at the garbled text at the right corner of the screen, you'll notice what happens to be a bird in a cage. I still have no idea what that meant. At this point, I was about to fight Titanosaurus, and I was worried as to what kind of glitches would happen this time, but to my surprise, Titanosaurus looked just fine. Although all the game's bipedal monsters were the same height, Titanosaurus was a bit taller, but since Titanosaurus actually was taller than Godzilla in the film, I thought this was kind of cool. After a very fun fight with a monster that wasn't supposed to be in the game, I took over the enemy base and proceeded not to Jupiter, like normal, but instead to Pathos. Pathos was the same as Jupiter in layout, except the board was dark blue rather than green. The first thing I noticed was that all the usual level icons had been replaced by a blue rock in some kind of orange honeycomb shape. There was one icon that had part of the jungle icon shape, but it didn't pay much attention to it. I checked the other side of the board to see the new monster. Instead of Hydra, it was Biollante. But that couldn't have been right. Godzilla vs. Biollante didn't come out until 1989, and this game was made in 1988. Perhaps Toho put Biollante in the game to build excitement for the movie next year, but changed their minds? I tried to rationalize the game's abnormalities in any way that I could, but this would prove to be futile. Pathos Map Song was the first new song I'd heard in the game. Like most of the new songs, it was hard to describe, but I'll give it a shot. It started out low and suspenseful, much slower than any song in the game, but every 20 seconds or so, there would be a loud clashing sound, and the tempo changed. It was like the composer randomly played parts from 5 different songs with the same instruments. I moved Godzilla over to one of the many blue rocks that had been placed in the jungle icons and started the level. The level resembled a blue mountain range with a blood-red planet in the sky. But there was something odd about the mountains. They had a shredded paper look to them. I thought at first maybe the glitch had affected it, but it looked far too intentional. I quickly noticed something else about this new level. There were no enemies at all. Not even any obstacles. I should also mention that this was where the point meter started to become glitched beyond comprehension, but it didn't bother me much. I never kept up with the game points. So without having to focus on anything, I listened to the music while walking through the level, unopposed. The music had a sorrowful feel. It would have been rather pleasant had I heard it in a normal game. The level went on for 3 screens, but with no obstacles around. I finished it very quickly. I tried other levels of the same type to see if any enemies appeared, but there was none. There was little else to be seen in the Blue Mountains, so I tried the other level type. I started one of the orange levels, and my eyes were assaulted with a grotesque background of tumorous orange eyes. The sky was the same as the ground, and I presume the game was indicating that this level takes place in a cave. The only enemies were Matango's spawn, but as you can see, the little bastards were everywhere. The music certainly didn't help, with a mixture of screeching sounds and loud drum beats that sounded like a monster's theme in a horror movie. After completing it, I tried to avoid playing through any more of these levels where I could. The map was so short, so it was only a few minutes before I was headed towards a rematch with Gazzara and Mogra. But this time, their sprites and attack patterns were vastly different. I fought Mogra first. Mogra's replacement was a flying machine with a slight resemblance to the Pascagoula alien. It was a bit like fighting Mothra, only it moved with a lot more grace. It attacked by spinning its front tentacles like a corkscrew, and it still had an I-beam, except now it fired from the drill. This lanky aberration had replaced Gazzara, and the new beast was far more of a challenge. It would run and jump at a fast pace, constantly swinging its arms and making its way to get close, and of course, it tried to pin me in the corner with as much annoying resolve as ever. I defeated it using a combination of tail whips and heat beam spamming. I defeated them and was going to fight Titanosaurus. But when I started the fight, Titanosaurus was nowhere to be seen, and the game simply went back to the map, with the Titanosaurus piece now missing. There was no one left to fight now but Biollante, so I eagerly started the battle. It was quite surprising that Biollante started the fight with her rose form. She was immobile and used tentacles to keep me away from the main body, which took most of the damage. As expected, she turned into her final form after taking enough damage. The sprite looked pretty damn good for 8-bit. And the battle technique was the same, except now Biollante could move, albeit slower than any other monster. Being hit by the tentacles did more damage now, and Biollante could do an acid spit, which I managed to avoid by jumping in a screen cap. Not much more difficult to beat than Titanosaurus. It only took 2 rounds, but when Biollante was gone, the music had stopped. And there was a new icon replacing the base. The icon wasn't there before I beat Biollante. It resembled a red tribal mask. I had a feeling of dread when I saw it. But since it replaced the base, it must be the only way to exit Pathos. I moved Godzilla to the square and started the level. It was a hellish-looking place with no sky and a flickering fire in the background, and the fire looked far more advanced than anything I'd seen on the NES. There was music in the form of a slow, steady drum sound, resembling a heartbeat, and all the text on the top of the screen and the life bars were gone, and in their place was a single bit of text in the middle of the screen that just said, "Run!" My feeling of dread had intensified, and I cautiously walked through the level, but like the Blue Mountains, there was no enemies. I paced around for a minute or two before thinking, run. From what? The first time, it hit me. I didn't even see it. I heard a noise outside of my room and turned back to see if something fell, and when I looked back, Godzilla was dying. I figured it must have been just a glitch, but I wasn't going to play through the game without Godzilla, so I restarted the game, went to the password screen. Have I ever mentioned how creepy the password screen music is? If you've played the game, you know what I mean. It doesn't at all fit the mood of the game. It's more like something from a horror game. Maybe they made it like that so kids wouldn't cheat. Yeah. I was quite annoyed at this point because I thought that I was going to have to fight all the monsters again, but that didn't happen. The game started me off right where I was before I started the red face level. So I tried again, making sure to pay attention this time. That's when I heard a low, bellowing sound, and I saw it. This thing. Do you know that feeling your body has when you feel like you're in extreme danger? You start to recoil and tense up as the adrenaline flows through your veins and your nerves start to feel very cold. That's the feeling I had when I took this screen cap. I haven't seen all the Godzilla movies, but I'm pretty damn sure this has never been in any one of them. It had to be something the creators made up, but what kind of sick fuck would put this into a children's game? By sheer dumb luck, or perhaps the adrenaline boost, I managed to run fast enough to get away from it. It ran very fast, so much so that if you saw it, you were almost certainly going to die. And when I say die, I mean your monster gets killed instantly if the creature touches them. Once I'd gone back to the map, I was so afraid that I was extremely tempted to just shut the game off and try to pretend it's never happened, and I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It couldn't have been real. And even if I wanted to continue, I still had to get Mothra through this chase level. But as I stayed inactive on the map screen for a few minutes, my fear was replaced by burning curiosity. What the hell just happened? What was the rest of the game like? I only had to beat this level with Mothra, and then it was on to the next world, but when I moved Mothra into the red face, the game registered it as me beating the level. I was quite relieved. I tried to prepare myself for the next world. Trance.